It's a sudden stop at the bottom.
There's an old saying in the world of video games. Video game movie adaptations suck. Like, big time. And I don't think I need to elaborate on this point or provide examples. But there's one big exception. The Chronicles of Riddick Escape from Butcher Bay. Well, two if you count the sequel, Assault on Dark Athena. This should be the part where I say, in fact, the games are even better than the movies, but I haven't seen the movies, so obviously I can't compare them. But judging by the metascores, it seems like the video games are indeed of higher quality. So how did this happen? Well, it's part of the series ending up in the hands of a talented studio that was given full creative freedom and used that opportunity to push the boundaries of the FPS genre by meshing it with mechanics from other genres, and Vin Diesel being a huge freaking nerd. His involvement with the project wasn't limited to him just borrowing his likeness to the game. He was involved in every single aspect of the development. The writing, the setting, the level design, the combat, everything. Basically, he didn't want to half-ass it. He didn't want his project to go down in history as that game with Vin Diesel. He wanted the studio to actually make a good game, and they knocked it out of the park. Also, I have to emphasize that measuring them against movie licensed titles is a huge disservice to these games. They're not better than your typical movie games, they're incredible pieces of art, period. And the fact that Starbreeze Studios managed to jam so many mechanics from different genres without causing the whole thing to burst from its seams is a laudable feat in and of itself. Anyway, here's what's gonna happen in this video. I'm gonna take a look at both Escape from Butcher Bay and Assault on Dark Athena and share my thoughts stream of consciousness style as I did in my Arcane video last year, because my usual format doesn't lend itself to this type of long form video essay type thingy. Why are both games in one video? Because Butcher Bay and Dark Athena are short, about 7 to 8 hours each, and they're better consumed as a package rather than individually. Fittingly, the definitive edition, which is the one I played for this video, contains Assault on Dark Athena and the remastered version of Escape from Butcher Bay in one client. Confusingly, the package itself bears the name of the sequel, which threw me off quite a bit when I was flipping through the web for a copy. Now, as is the case with many titles covered on this channel, these games are abandonware, as in you can't buy them anywhere. I'm not quite sure why or who holds the rights, and frankly I didn't even bother to investigate because I'm still experiencing some lingering feelings of bitterness after the, No One Lives Forever copyright fiasco. So let's just say that the description of a certain video may or may not contain a link to a borrowed copy of a particular FPS starring a well-respected Hollywood actor who's also in a franchise about the car chases. One last thing. In case it wasn't obvious until now, you don't need to watch the movies before playing the games to understand the finer details of this universe. In fact, working your way through the games before jumping into the movies may be the best approach after all, since Escape from Butcher Bay and Assault on Dark Athena are prequels. So, without further ado, let's see what the big fuss is all about.
Any Xeno activity?
No, nothing.
Good. Hope it stays that way.
Just a minute. There's been a cave in here.
Escape from Butcher Bay kicks off not with Vin Diesel highlighting the family-like closeness of his ragtag group of illegal car racers, or whatever the fuck that franchise is about at this point anyway, but with our boy Vin in the role of Riddick, who is on his way to the maximum security prison Butcher Bay for unspecified crimes. If I were to guess, it all happened at the space insurance company where Riddick was engaged in a heated debate with a space clerk over a busted headlight. His deep, reverberating voice, enhanced by the years of frustration with the space insurance industry, rattled the building, causing a sizable piece of debris to fall on the clerk's head and killing them on the spot. Riddick was found guilty of Let's say involuntary manslaughter and sentenced to life without the possibility of parole at the Butcher Bay maximum security prison, and here we are. Makes total sense. Nah, he was captured by a bounty hunter called Johns who planned to sell Riddick to Butcher Bay for a fat check. Anyway, not long after they arrive, Riddick frees himself, eats the bounty hunter and the guard, and jumps into the sewers. Look, I know the game has escape in the title, but boy, I didn't expect the escaping part to happen that quickly in the campaign. Moving on, Riddick's escape attempt fittingly coincides with the start of the tutorial. We're taught how to sneak, how to fight, how to shoot, how to interact with objects, and how to move and traverse through the game's treacherous environments filled to the brim with hazards and obstacles. Riddick, of course, being the unstoppable force of nature that he is, passes all these challenges with high marks. And as he makes his way towards the final stop of his escape, he discovers that, as Christopher Wallace put it on his 1994 classic hit Juicy, it was all a dream. Even though I saw this obvious twist coming from a mile away, I still held a sliver of hope that Riddick's hectic escape actually happened. Like when someone spoils the ending of a movie that you were really looking forward to seeing, and fueled by a stubborn sort of denial, you proceed to watch it hoping it will turn out differently. Yeah, that's kinda like how this whole intro sequence felt. It lets you live out the purest of power fantasies, lurking from the shadows, snapping necks, blasting guards, outgunned and outnumbered, and then it pulls the rug from under your feet. Anyway, with that whole shebang over, Johns takes Riddick to the entrance of the prison for a meetup with Hoxie, the legendarily sadistic warden of Butcher Bay, and Exhibit. Okay, his character's name is Abbott, but I just wanted to get the fact that Exhibit is in this game out of the way as soon as possible. A little back and forth later, Riddick is surrendered to the prison staff and we get our first look at Butcher Bay itself, and boy, it's fucking rough. This whole walking sequence is a deceptively clever introduction to the setting and the story. You got Exhibit here droning about how he runs the prison in a gang-like fashion, an electrician fixing some sort of alarm system that had been probably busted during a previous riot, Abbott talking with a guard about payouts from gang activities, prisoners screaming out Riddick's name, and tons of other details that I definitely missed this first time around. I'm a sucker for cleverly crafted diegetic intro sequences that know how to set the tone and build up excitement. This is just one of the many ways in which Escape from Butcher Bay was ahead of its time, and I honestly don't remember other games from that era doing this. Anyway, all good intro sequences come to an end, and Riddick is unceremoniously thrown into a dingy cell that will serve as his new home for the rest of his living days. In lesser games, this would immediately kickstart a chain of events wherein Riddick exploits a moment of inattention, grabs a gun and starts blasting his way towards the front door. But no, this is not that kind of game. Instead, the story slows to a halt and allows players to get the lay of the land, so to speak, and immerse themselves in prison life, chatting with prisoners, listening to inmates talking about their own plans of escaping this hellhole, exploring these decrepit halls and cells that have surely been host to some of the most fucked up scenes of violence and human depravity in the galaxy. It's not a large area by any stretch, but it's so atmospheric, almost as if these walls have absorbed the desperation and lingering paranoia of decades worth of inmates who are always on edge, knowing that even the briefest moment of weakness can cost them their lives. That the cellmate they considered their friend and ally yesterday would stick a shank in the back of their head without a moment's hesitation if it meant a bit more money in their commissary or an additional serving of food at the cafeteria. A small moment that perfectly encapsulates the vibe of this place is a brief, very missable conversation between two sadistic brothers who are torturing an inmate. You don't get to witness it directly, but the inmate's pleas for mercy and the cold matter-of-factness with which the brothers discuss the logistics of torturing this man tells you everything you need to know. Now, as gruesome as this whole scene is, it's also kind of funny in a twisted way. While torturing the inmate, the brothers express frustration at the fact that they have to constantly keep their excitement in check and take their time because they get only one prisoner per week. So, in a way, by their own twisted logic, they are the real victims here because these blasted guards refuse to provide them with a steady supply of inmates to have fun with. Oof, this shit's messed up, man. And to think I'd always assumed this was a PG-13 game because the Chronicles of Riddick the movie had the same rating. Circling back to the beginning of our prison stay, the first inmate you interact with, in a gameplay capacity at least, is Barber, who sets up a meet with a guy named Madsen in the courtyard. Once there, you get a sense of the true scale of this prison, with its towering buildings and myriad facilities brimming with heavily armed guards who are instructed to shoot first and never ask questions. Escaping this place won't be easy, so you will need to enlist some help. And what better place to start than the courtyard, which serves the role of a makeshift central hub where players can pick up quests and get familiar with Butcher Bay's social dynamics. Those social dynamics being that basically everybody wants to shank each other. 10 minutes into this fucking game and my quest log already looks like the script of an Oz episode. And similar to any newly introduced Oz character, the game makes it very clear that Riddick is at the bottom of the pecking order, and that the brand recognition of his name won't be enough to keep him alive. Consequently, virtually the first inmate that gives you a quest screws you over by setting up an ambush in your own cell. Now let's stop for a moment and process what's been happening so far. Did you notice something peculiar about this game's pacing and structure? If not, this is what I meant in the intro when I stated that Butcher Bay mixes and matches mechanics from multiple genres: stealth, shooting, platforming, side quests, social elements, environmental storytelling. This is the template of a bare-bones immersive sim. Every single thing from the gameplay mechanics to the level design and quest structure work in tandem towards a single goal: to provide players with full immersion. This entire sequence from the moment you arrive at the prison to the first mini-boss is a textbook case of how to tutorialize and introduce players to the game world organically. And to make up for my overly verbose preamble, since a bit of me dies every single time I use the word organic non-ironically, what I was trying to say is that designing introductory segments that hook players is an underrated art form. Media in general, whether we're talking about books, music, films, and even games, live and die by how well crafted their introductions are. Moving on, Butcher Bay's merits extend beyond just knowing how to hook players. It's also good at escalating things and gradually introducing new challenges and mechanics. The game proper, meaning the escaping part from its title, starts right after you defeat Rust, the leader of a prison gang and the first mini-boss of sorts. Rust serves a double narrative/mechanical purpose: to establish Riddick as the top dog in prison, as proven by the fact that Abbott immediately offers him Rust's job, and as a test of sorts of the player's hand-to-hand combat skills. Rust is significantly more aggressive and shrewd than the random goons you'd fought up until that point, so you have to put everything the game has taught you so far to practice. Speaking of which, Butcher Bay and Assault on Dark Athena, to a similar degree, has some of the most visceral and gut-wrenching hand-to-hand combat systems I've ever seen in a video game. It's pretty basic in how it functions. To execute certain combos and moves, all you have to do is simply hit the enemies from different directions and time your punches correctly to disarm them. It may not possess the fluidity of something like, I don't know, a Batman Arkham game or even Sleeping Dogs, but the sense of physicality it confers through the animations and the way Riddick moves more than make up for it. Add to that a sizable collection of blunt and sharp objects, and you're in for a gory good time. So after eating Rust and dropping a few quests, you gain access to the infirmary, which is basically the gateway to the forbidden areas you have to access to escape Butcher Bay. Here the game does something very interesting. You're alone in the infirmary, unarmed, with two heavily armed guards that could easily kill you with a couple of shots. Under normal circumstances, the game would telegraph in some way that you have to wait for a story-specific trigger to make your move. Say an alarm starts blaring or something. In this case, the proper moment to pounce on the guards is left to you to decide. My monkey, accustomed to being handheld brain, almost couldn't believe that the game would be gracious enough to allow me to think for myself. So I did just that and fucked up. But that's okay, we live and learn.
Good effort. Bad result.
The second time the game puts your skills to test is when it has you fight this mech right after a hectic, inhumanly intense sequence of gallery shooting. This is where Butcher Bay pulls one of its most clever tricks. You'd think the game is testing your shooting abilities. Wrong. The mech's front chassis is virtually impenetrable and its machine gun can rip you to shreds in a matter of seconds. The key to defeating this vulgar hulk of metal is outsmarting it. How does one do that? Well, shooting the lights, yes, that's an actual mechanic that will save you a ton of headaches, and shooting it in the back and retreating back to the shadows guerrilla style until it falls dead. What follows is another 15 to 20 minutes of shooting against the backdrop of a prison riot which was obviously instigated by you, and you escape through the prison's sewer systems. This is where Riddick dips its toes into survival horror. Not the part where you shoot an eternally respawning wave of dwellers, no, but when this dude has you recover his voice box, which he conveniently lost in the only area of this entire fucking sewer system that sits in pitch darkness. So you have to carefully make your way to that precious item by illuminating a path with some torches, which are non-replenishable by the way, while being attacked from all directions by these sewer abominations. Oh, and you know what his precious voice box actually is? It's a freaking radio! But hey, once that is all done, you get Riddick's iconic eye shine, which allows you to see in the dark, so all's well I guess. You get to kick Abbott's ass and kill him. Oh right, no. Actually you're arrested and dumped into an even worse level of the prison. If you thought Gen Pop was bad, oh boy, wait until you see this place. And then you start all over again. Getting the lay of the land, familiarizing yourself with the prison's dynamics, which basically amount to everybody wanting to shank each other, and yet again your quest log looks like the script of an Oz episode 10 minutes in. But this time shit's real, at least you had a bed in Gen Pop. Here inmates sleep in containers and the guards are even more abusive, so Riddick will need to enlist the help of a few friends. And these potential friends don't fuck around. These are some of the nastiest and most depraved criminals the galaxy has ever spawned. One of them is named Gulag for crying out loud, though that might have less to do with his criminal background and more with the fact that he has an Eastern European accent. The reason why I've decided to walk you through the first maybe half of the game instead of, making an attempt at actual critique is very simple. I just wanted to emphasize how brilliant the pacing of this game is and how the moment-to-moment gameplay reinforces its setting and themes. It's not a prison break game just in name. Everything from the things you do, the level design and the brief conversations between inmates you overhear are there to reinforce this theme. That being said, I've spent the last maybe 2,000 or so words talking about how the game plays out and neglected to cover how the game actually plays. At its core, Escape from Butcher Bay is a first-person action game with stealth elements. It's not a first-person shooter as some articles may lead you to believe, as the campaign is evenly split between shooting and stealth sections. As I said earlier in the video, what's intriguing about Escape from Butcher Bay is the sheer amount of seemingly conflicting genres Starbreeze Studios have managed to jam in such a small package without causing the whole thing to collapse under its own weight. I already talked about the melee combat, so let's take a look at the shooting. Now, I wouldn't call the shooting groundbreaking, but it does its job very well. It's carried over by some tight animation work and the extremely pronounced physical feedback it provides. You can feel the full impact of the weapon you're using, especially in the case of the shotgun. It's really hard to screw up shotguns in first-person shooters, and Riddick is no exception to this rule. Also, in my No One Lives Forever 2 video, I argued that head bob when done right can greatly contribute to immersion, and Butcher Bay serves as proof of this. Another interesting decision is not assigning leaning around corners to a specific key, but making it trigger contextually. Basically, when approaching the edge of a wall, Riddick will do it by himself. It doesn't always work as intended and it takes a ton of practice to nail it, but I can't deny it adds a bit of, and please forgive me for using this expression, flavor to the environmental interaction. Ugh. Now, I mentioned earlier that the game is split evenly between shooting and stealth, but to be perfectly honest with you, I think you spend more time sneaking than busting kneecaps in the open. I've dedicated significant portions of my last two videos bitching about poorly implemented stealth systems, so I'm not gonna do it here. I think it's high time I closed that chapter of my life and turned my attention to more positive things. Okay, I lied, I'm gonna complain just a bit. So, a core mechanic of Butcher Bay's stealth system is Riddick's eye shine. Riddick obtains it unwillingly from the old man from the sewers who had him recover his precious useless heirloom during a bizarrely low-budget pre-rendered cutscene. The logic behind it is pretty simple. You disable light sources, stick to the shadows, and pounce on enemies when they least expect it. Sounds very cool on paper. In practice, Riddick's eye shine is nothing more than a glorified night vision mode. The game doesn't do anything special with it. Its novelty lies in the fact that it's narratively contextualized. There's a rhyme and reason to Riddick possessing this power, which I'm not going to get into because I'm not a nerd. I'm joking, I just don't want to spoil the story. Secondly, Escape from Butcher Bay suffers from the same caveats that many stealth action hybrids possess. The cheap AI and the frustratingly prescient behavior it displays. This would have been mitigated by the level design, but it too comes with its own quirks. Butcher Bay likes to create the illusion of choice when it comes to traversing levels, but in most cases there is an ideal route you have to take. Here's an example. Behind this door are two enemy guards patrolling on an L-shaped catwalk right above me. There are no shadows to hide in, so you're fully exposed. The logical thing to do would be to walk alongside the wall right below them, but if I do that, they immediately spot me. That is, if you don't get shot at as soon as you enter the door, which happened to me on numerous occasions. Making things even harder is a sniper that pops out on the balcony way in the distance at regular intervals. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get the timing right. The window of time when all the guards are not facing the direction I'm supposed to sneak through is just too tight. Assuming you manage to pull it off and go, say, to the left, the route is also patrolled by a guard, an encounter which will certainly catch you off guard. Get it? Because there's no way you could have known this. So the only thing left to do is looking for an alternate path, if it even exists. And via a bit of backtracking you can access the catwalk adjacent to the one patrolled by the guards, which is conveniently covered in shadows. In conclusion, the game technically offers two routes, but functionally just one of them is viable. And trust me, this is just the tip of the iceberg. I could fill 10 more minutes with examples, but I don't think that would add too much value to the video. To be fair to Butcher Bay, stealth works very well in linear areas, and it seems to have been designed with enclosed spaces in mind. It flows so naturally to the point that you enter this almost trance-like state where you yeet enemies, drag their bodies into the dark, and rinse and repeat until you've systematically cleared the entire map, and feel like the master of your domain. Wait, I think I've used this line before. Fuck it, I'm not editing the script. What absolves the stealth of all of its sins in my eyes is that it's very appropriate to the theme of the game. This game is called Escape from Butcher Bay after all, not shooting your way to the front door bay. Nobody has ever escaped this prison, so it makes sense that Riddick faces adversity at every step, and the gameplay reflects that. The cool thing is that no matter how much shit gets thrown at him, Riddick always feels firmly in control of the situation. Whether he ends up in a pit fighting mutants, getting swarmed by ferocious cave-dwelling xenomorphs, or condemned to a lifetime of cryosleep with only 10 minutes of wakefulness per day to look for a window of escape, he treats everything with a sort of almost sociopathic level of calm that, to be perfectly honest with you, I found both badass and kinda creepy at the same time. If you'll allow me a small cliche, one could say that the staff is trapped in this prison with Riddick and not the other way around. Usually these types of stoic, overly masculine characters leave me cold because God knows the last 20 years of pop culture have been dominated by white male anti-heroes and I'm yearning for something else. But in the case of Riddick it works because he's not quite human in the traditional sense of the word. He's closer to an animal, willing to do what it takes to survive, from doing favors for shady individuals, participating in deadly fight clubs, pushing drugs, and even a murder for hire. That's not to say Riddick doesn't have a code of sorts or black sympathy, but the game never beats you over the head with it. Riddick has done some nasty shit throughout his life, and the game certainly makes no excuses for him. So that'll be it with Escape from Butcher Bay. It's a really solid first-person stealth game that's oozing atmosphere and passion. It's not perfect by any stretch, the stealth mechanics seem half-baked, the physics engine can keep up and it's quite buggy at times, but it hits that sweet spot between jank and innovation that I've always loved. This game, as imperfect as it may be, has something that many games with bigger budgets lack: heart. And this applies to the sequel too. So let's get to the next game, Assault on Dark Athena.
Tell you what, you put away your gun, and we'll do this like real men. Put away your fucking... This is where you...
Assault on Dark Athena picks up where Butcher Bay left off. The intro cinematic sees Riddick musing about the darkness or something like that in the backdrop of a totally not ominous black screen. We then witness Riddick laying dazed out on a beach, probably in the wake of suffering the after effects of attending a Red Hot Chili Peppers concert. He is suddenly awakened by a Windows Movie Maker transition, the title screen pops up and yeah, the game starts. No scene setting intro featuring Exhibit, no random beachgoers shouting at Riddick for playing Nickelback on his Bluetooth speakers or leaving cigarette butts behind, nothing. We get straight into the game. It's not yet clear how Riddick ended up washing on the shore, so we might as well tackle the first objective: finding a way out of this place. So basically it's tutorial town population Riddick. We get reaccustomed to some core mechanics such as going into stealth mode and crawling through vents, and then we stumble into this we have Walton Goggins at home looking dude. So here's what's interesting. Butcher Bay had a dialogue tree system thingy, but it was pretty bare bones, and no matter what you chose, the outcome was always the same. In Assault on Dark Athena, it's still bare bones, but it has a bit more depth, as proven by this encounter where we are given the option to either comfort this dude or tell him to get his shit together. Interestingly, Starbreeze Studio intended for Butcher Bay to feature more complex role-playing mechanics, but decided against it after receiving feedback from testers and Vin Diesel himself. The original also underwent substantial dialogue rewrites, as Diesel felt Riddick talked too much. I suspect those scrapped RPG mechanics also included a branching dialogue tree, but I couldn't find anything to confirm that, so let's just file this under personal speculation and leave it at that. Anyway, Riddick bids goodbye to Scoot McNeary here and presses on to find an escape from this place. Immediately after, we are reacquainted to the hand-to-hand combat system. Nothing new here. Remember, Butcher Bay was remastered on the template of the sequel. What's different this time around is that we get aerial takedowns, and they're as tricky to pull off as they're fun. Also, there's a new enemy type called the Drone. They're these half-human, half-machine David Cronenberg body horror abominations with implanted guns which are controlled remotely. What's cool is that in order to use their weapons, you have to physically pick up their bodies and shoot, but more on the drones later. Blah blah, you find some conventional weapons, yada yada, you go through a tunnel and whoa, dude, this was also a dream. So here's what actually happened. After escaping the infamous maximum security prison, Riddick and his frenemy Johns find themselves on a ship in cryosleep, presumably on their way to drown themselves in space alcohol in a space dive bar somewhere, because honestly, who wouldn't after the shit they just witnessed in that dump? As they're taking their beauty sleep, their ship gets towed towards the Assault on Dark Athena itself, a giant mercenary vessel led by Revus, an ex-bounty hunter who went rogue after receiving a cease and desist letter from Disney for adopting the nickname Revan. Presumably. The bustle of getting their ship dragged via a giant piece of space cable is enough to wake Riddick up from his cryosleep, and in walks Revus herself with her goons, who pick up Johns to be horribly experimented on at a later date, and they just fuck off without looking for the second person who's already around given their freshly opened cryosleep pod. Also, Riddick Tobey Maguires himself down and nicks her hairpin straight from her hair. You know, I have a sneaking suspicion that them going rogue had less to do with it paying better than legitimate mercenary work, and more with the fact that their sheer stupidity made them outright unhireable. Anyway, Riddick follows them into the space vessel and yeah. Not 5 minutes have passed since escaping Butcher Bay and Riddick already has to break out of another place. Only this time, instead of psychopathic guards and Xenos, he has to deal with something even worse. Fanboys.
Your face is kind of familiar. Where do I recognize it from?
Butcher Bay, class of not long ago.
Holy shit! You're Riddick, right? Fucking hell! You were the talk of the bay!
Escape from Butcher Bay and its damp, depressing and labyrinthian prison provided a setting that hasn't been explored too much in video games. Add a dozen or so interesting characters and pieces of well-crafted environmental storytelling, and it's really hard not to be skeptical about Dark Athena's more conventional sci-fi setting. I don't think it's a stretch to say that a space prison is more interesting than a, well, space station. And let me tell you, I was so off the mark this time. Now, I might get a lot of shit for saying this, but I found Dark Dark Athena's space vessel to be as, if not even more compelling a setting than Butcher Bay. Look, I am a huge fan of the whole lost on a space station and fighting against insurmountable odds thematic, like for example Prey 2017, Dead Space and whatnot. I have a soft spot for this shit. That feeling of satisfaction and progression you get as you're gradually unraveling all the facets and secrets of that hostile environment and learning how to confront it is something truly special. And Riddick, though very linear and story driven at its core, comes super close to that. But that's not what really hooked me to Dark Athena's setting. You see, as gritty as Butcher Bay was, its colorful cast of characters and the over-the-top violence, like seriously, these guards are comically evil, made it seem almost like a parody sometimes, like a Bad Oz episode, and if you've watched that show, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Dark Athena is, how do I put this, more consistently dark in its tone. I don't want to spoil anything, but there were two story moments that took me completely by surprise in how tragic and fucked up they were. Two moments of sudden, extreme and senseless violence that change your outlook radically. But I don't want to ruin them, so let's talk about these screwed up mechanical abominations that you'll be fighting for like half the game. So here's the thing about these drones. When I said that they're half men, half machines, I meant that in the most literal sense possible. Actually scratch that, they're more like 3/4 machine, 1/4 flesh. So where did they come from? Well, these drones were once fully fleshed humans. In case you're wondering who would willingly volunteer themselves to become mindless hulks of flesh and metal, well, they didn't. The vast majority of the drones you see wandering through Dark Athena were once regular people, usually the inhabitants of small defenseless villages on forgotten planets. These people were kidnapped en masse by the mercenaries and turned into drones. After escaping the vessel towards the end of the game, you get to actually visit one of these places after it had been depopulated by the mercenaries. A small but not insignificant number of these drones were once either soldiers and officers captured in battle, or even their own colleagues who were presumably turned into drones as punishment for stepping on the toes of the increasingly totalitarian leader Revas. There is a main story moment where Riddick stumbles upon a few people who were in the process of being transformed into these things. One of these poor bastards in his last moments of lucidity begged me to take a message to his wife and young child and stop the conversion by killing him, which I did after promising that his family will know that his last thoughts were about them. And it was heartbreaking. I'll be honest with you, I hadn't given these drones a second thought until that encounter, but this piece of info changed my mindset dramatically. It turns what was a relatively standard prison break into something much more. It isn't just about your own survival anymore, it's about ridding the world of these fucking psychopaths who kidnap innocents and convert them into these mindless mechanical zombies, shattering families and entire communities in the process. And yes, I just mentioned the word family in the context of a piece of media starring Vin Diesel. Haha, Dom Toretto meme, haha. This moment also marks a kind of maturing in Riddick's character, in the sense that unlike Escape from Butcher Bay, we get to witness a more humane side of his personality. He shows a willingness to grow beyond his cynical, dog-eat-dog outlook on life and use his survival skills for altruistic reasons, like helping those in need. Take the child stowaway Riddick meets. She was kidnapped together with her mother, but she managed to slip by while her mother was imprisoned on the same ship. The old Riddick would not have given a shit about her, but present Riddick stopped just short of melting in the face of this child's sadness, who just wanted to reunite with her mother. Later the game hints that Riddick intends to take her on as his protege, but since we didn't get a sequel, there's no way to confirm whether that's true. So, setting and story-wise, I think Assault on Dark Athena is the superior game. The stakes are much higher this time around, on account of having a bunch of sociopathic mercenaries as the main antagonists, and we get to see an excellent example of how to do character development in the form of Riddick making a genuine effort to, you know, be human. Now, from a gameplay perspective, there's not a lot to talk about. There are two main differences between Escape from Butcher Bay and Assault on Dark Athena. The sequel is much more action-oriented and Stealth got a fresh coat of paint in the form of a few mechanics and gadgets. Stealth is just as janky as in Escape from Butcher Bay. It's plagued by the same unpredictable, cheap AI that can miraculously spot you from 2 rooms away. As far as weapon variety is concerned, you got your shotgun, assault rifle, and the newly added SMG. RPG. Because you'll be engaged in more shootouts this time around, the quirks of the gunplay stand out more as a result. The shooting is not this series' strong point, and the devs made a good call by relegating it to the role of palate cleanser between the campaign's lengthy stealth sections in Butcher Bay. It's worth mentioning that Assault on Dark Athena makes a genuine effort to put a few interesting spins on the combat. The first thing that comes to mind is this section where you and the enemies are standing above a glass dome which can break and suck everybody into the chasm, so you have to be very careful where you shoot. You also get this Half-Life 2 bootleg gravity gun type thingy called the Scar Gun, which shoots sticky grenades. You can detonate up to 5 projectiles at the same time, and it's really good for crowd control. What's cool is that the devs even designed a few puzzles around it. I still haven't played Half-Life 2, by the way. There is also a space combat segment where you control a mech. It's quite entertaining but janky as fuck. Thankfully it lasts about 10 minutes, so it's not a big deal. Speaking of which, Assault on Dark Athena has more mech sections than Butcher Bay, for which I'm definitely grateful. Shooting and stomping on enemies while controlling a mech is never not fun. One of these mechs even has an AI that gives you shit for being so bad at handling it, and yeah, pretty funny. What's not so funny are the alpha drones. These big boys can't be defeated through conventional means. So what you have to do here is incapacitate them with your Scar Gun and finish them off up close. The first time you fight them is cool and intense and comes out of nowhere, but then the game just starts recycling them for no apparent reason. It's quite obvious that the devs ran out of ideas towards the end, and as a result the game's up until that point excellent pacing fizzles out like my dreams and aspirations as I reached my late 20s. Light mechanics also make a comeback, but here the level design seems to have been built with it in mind. I don't have anything interesting to add here, but just so you know, it can result in some moments of unexpectedly emergent gameplay. Just trust me on this one, try to mess around with it, you won't be disappointed. And that's it, I think. Assault on Dark Athena is much shorter than Butcher Bay, and I think I spoiled a quarter of this game just by virtue of dedicating, let's see, I wanna say 12 minutes to it in this video, so I'm gonna stop. Transition, I guess?
He's not getting through again. He could kiss his ass goodbye if he does.
Did anyone check the vent?
Who the fuck crawls through a vent?
How do I even conclude this mess of a video? Escape from Butcher Bay and Assault on Dark Athena represent some of the most interesting entries in gaming history, and not just because they're good video game movie adaptations, but they're a textbook case of what happens when you round up a group of talented and experienced developers and just let them experiment. The best way to describe these games is that they are the equivalent of a band reverse engineering a cohesive album out of their weekend jams. The individual components may be rough around the edges, but the end result is much greater than the sum of its parts. These games try to tackle so many genres in such a small package, and somehow they don't lack focus, which is incredible. I highly recommend you check out Escape from Butcher Bay and Assault on Dark Athena. They're far from being masterpieces, but boy are they ambitious. Thanks for watching, I'll see you next time.